All right,
There we
so
go.
we have to show this off again then, don't we? Best crown in the known world. Heavy. This side has the motto non scripta non, sorry, do it the right way, non scripta non est. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. Whose title is that?
Istvan.
Ishtvan's, thank y'all. And on the other hand side, it has Metron Ariston. And just at the moment I showed this the first time, Bambi joined the meeting. That is, of course, whose title is Alison McCool of Elfane. Yep, it is true. So the question of, I will take this not as a question. Cormac says, uneasy lies the head that has to bear that crown. And on the one hand, true. On the other hand, not so much. So ask me something. That crown is one of the heaviest crowns ever. So I will tell this story again. I told it just before we started. So about a decade ago, this was re-gilded. It's base metal that's gilt. They sent it to Mexico. The original craftsman did it. It turns out the electroplating's way cheaper in Mexico. And we almost didn't get it back because when they got to the border, the customs agents looked at it and said, this is a Mexican antiquity. And nearly didn't let it back. And the craftsman had to go and find images to show that he had done this own work himself. Yeah. Has anybody ever seen the crown that there is a medieval picture of an English king of arms that's even crazier than this? So, in fact, it's pretty realistic.
It is, it was modeled, that was inspired by the English crown that you're talking about. And there's another story about that. When it was originally delivered by Grey Raven, it was at the Anstioran Heraldic Symposium when I was stepping down and Daoud was taking over. So I was the first one who got to wear it. And does it happen?
I realize you got to wear it. I thought Daoud was the
Yes.
first one to wear it.
No, it was delivered. I got to wear it. That was one of my comment about it's easier if you wear a veil. Unfortunately, I was wearing blue and white, so I sort of looked like the Virgin Mary. You know, a bit of praise.
There you go.
But the punchline of the story is that the Anstioran crown, well, coming to the event and to do a court and feast. And I was wearing the crown for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Anstioran crown basically threw a shit fit because we had a prettier crown than they did.
We have the prettiest crown. Mind you, if you had to wear this thing to an entire court, you would have an enormous headache at the end of it. Every time I've worn it,
I claim now to this day that that's what the pain in my neck is.
I've left it sitting until I absolutely have to put it on, then I throw it on, go do the thing, and then I take it off the minute I'm back because it is really heavy, which means you have to stand very, very, very straight. All right, so I've been asked a group of questions. So the first one is, what is Laurel? Really the second one, but I'm gonna do them in reverse order. What does Laurel actually do? Yeah, so Laurel is, of course, the chief herald of the society. That is the person who's in charge of making sure that all the heraldry happens in the broadest sense. And so what does that mean? Well, the first thing it means is, of course, working with the principal heralds. That is to say, most heraldry, at least of the non-submissions variety, is largely organized at the kingdom level because, of course, kingdoms do things differently. And we would never want to tell all kingdoms that they have to do things one way or another. And so it's about making sure that things are happening in the kingdoms, helping the kingdom groups, the different kingdoms to talk to each other so that we can solve problems and do in different ways. That one's been exciting this year because, of course, we've been solving a new and different set of problems this year. Ones that I kind of hoped we'd never have to solve, like how to run a virtual known world, but we're doing that okay. The other thing that Laurel does then is keeps the whole submissions process going. So obviously, I don't do very much of the work. The work is done by my esteemed colleagues, the other sovereigns of arms, Pelican and Wreath. But yeah, who are sitting there, I'm staring at Alice and Cormac right now. Cormac is of course about to step down, but has been there for most of my tenure. The other thing, of course, Laurel does is advise the board and, of course, the other society officers on issues tied to heraldry. Sometimes, most of the time, there's not much of that, but occasionally, surprise Nazis, suddenly you find yourself talking to people about heraldic kinds of issues and concerns. So, to next question about that is, what's the necessary balance between heraldic knowledge and administrative acumen? That is, can anyone who's been a good enough administrator and facilitator run the college? Can the most tactless heraldic savants be Laurel? And my answer is, we tried that and it didn't work out so well. We had someone as Laurel several years ago who was a great scribe, already a Pelican and a Laurel, who was recruited to do the Laurel job and found herself in situations in which it was really hard for her to figure out sort of what things needed to happen and what things didn't. On the other hand, you don't have to be an amazing herald. You certainly don't have to be someone who has already done the job of Pelican or Wreath, though of course I've done Pelican and my successor, I think everyone knows that Emma has been named as my successor, Emma de Featherstone, has been Wreath. That kind of level of knowledge isn't. You need to know enough to know essentially when something's going wrong or something's really off kilter without having to ask a whole lot of questions or have someone point it out, because then it's easier to manage things. So that's my answer around that. And Serafina asked me, since I've been both Pelican and Laurel, which job did you like better and why? That's an interesting question. I like them both in very different kinds of ways. There was something very, very satisfying about the Pelican job because you could see the work that you did every month out there in black and white, and then you were done and you could kind of put it away and then do the next set. Whereas as Laurel, things sort of keep coming back in all kinds of ways because policy doesn't get settled and doesn't get done, and you find yourself doing the same things over and over and over and over and over. But I've really, really enjoyed being Laurel. So now the next thing is, do I do Wreath next?
You should.
Hey, somebody's got to do the trifecta, right?
I was going to say the my answer to that would be pretty similar, which is because I did the 6 months as Laurel. I really enjoyed being Wreath because you get to make decisions and you get to see your work out there and you get to have arguments on, heraldic armory things. And I really enjoyed that. And that monthly timeline, the trains running on time. Laurel's totally different. So it's very different. There's a lot more policy, a lot more dealing with other kingdoms really than you do even as a submissions herald. It's, I don't know, it's apples and oranges. I really can't compare the two.
I'm really glad I did both of them. That's what I'll say. I'm really, really glad I did both of them.
Yeah, well, and if I had hated being Laurel, I would not have applied for it this time.
Yep,
so
exactly. So about how many hours a week do I find myself working as Laurel? A lot, but. So there's a combination of things that I find myself doing. So it's not, when I did the job of Pelican, it was like every week I had to put in so many hours or the whole thing kind of went off the rails. Because when you're Pelican or Wreath, you're prepping for a meeting, you're drafting decisions, and you're putting things through our proofreading system. If someone wants to ask about our proofreading system, I'll tell you way too much about it. And if you're not keeping all of those balls moving at their respective paces, you get behind. And if you get behind, you're doomed. As Laurel, there are weeks where I don't work nearly as much as I worked when I was doing the job of Pelican, but there are other weeks when it consumes my entire waking life. It just kind of depends on what else is going on and what's that. So I think that the answer, I think we tell people it's 15 hours a week, 15 to 20. And I think that's about right. But a lot of it sort of fits into the interstices of other things I'm doing. It helps that I teach at a university, and so I have these weird kinds of flexibility in my day and life, but it's quite the thing. So I was asked then what we're doing, what steps have been taken to allow the College of Arms to be more responsive to registered names or arms that are discovered to be invocative or representative of hate groups or figures. I assume you meant or figures rather than of figures. So we're in an interesting situation around that. And that is that the policy, not of the Laurel office, but the policy of the board of directors is that things that are registered stay registered. And if that policy were to be changed, it would have to be changed essentially above my pay grade. Having said that, presumably any such proposal would go through me. What we have done is we've made it far easier for people to change what they're doing. So we've done this in a couple of ways. First, we've been doing some consultation and helping people who have realized that they have names or devices that are currently over that edge. Because one of the things that's true is that edges really change. Once upon a not so very long time ago, there were certain symbols that felt okay that today don't, because new groups of people are grabbing onto them and using them in new ways as symbols of hate. And so in many cases, people registered these things in good faith, or they lived in a world in which no one thought very hard about whether or not certain terms of ethnicity, for example, were offensive, that today large numbers of people inside and outside of those groups see now as inappropriate. And so people started these things sometimes in really good faith. In other cases, maybe not so much. But trying to help people who want to change those things to change those things. The big thing we've done in addition to that consultation is made those resubmissions, or rather those changes of devices and names, free. That is, that we promulgated a policy last month saying that if you wanted to change an item that was considered offensive, you were welcome to do so on our dime, because we want to make it clear that that can be done. Yeah, Evan observes we're going to be really screwed when some really nasty hate group decides to use a laurel wreath as their symbol. How many of you guys saw the guy from, I think it was Germany, from Drachenwald, who had a leather jacket that basically, it was almost the arms of Drachenwald. Yeah. It's an issue. So, I mean, it's something that we have to think about. So, yeah, as Cormac said, it was the dragon and the laurel wreath, but white. But yeah, it was very clearly the Drachenwald arms. And so it's a reminder that, you know, what is considered hateful now and what will be considered hateful 20 years in the future, I don't know that they're the same thing. Yep. Thank you. By the way, keep repeating things if I don't catch them, because there's a lot of stuff that's gone by. So the question was asked, what kinds of prior experience best prepares someone who would be interested in the job of Laurel? I'd say that there are many routes to the job of Laurel. And in fact, one of the things that I think sincerely that it makes heraldry work better when we have different people with different skills across time and space. The sort of classic route to being Laurel is, of course, to be principal herald of a kingdom. But here's the deal, being principal herald is maybe isn't necessary and it's not sufficient, but it's a good step in that direction. So what are the things that, and now I'm going to step out of my ask me anything as Laurel, and I'm just going to be Juliana for a second. So one of the things that I've been in charge of for a really long time is sort of recruiting for the Laurel office. I don't mean to suggest that I get to decide who gets to do the job, but just sort of cultivating people who want to do the job, right? And so what are the things that I think you need? The first thing you need is you need to have that administrative acumen. You've got to understand how big organizations work, because in the end, heraldry and the SCA is an enormous organization. If you think about it from the basic pursuivants and the people who are just being heralds at large, up through the kingdoms and to the Laurel office itself, that's a lot of people. And a lot of people who put a lot of time and energy into this and feel a lot of ownership of the business of heraldry. And you kind of have to have a handle on who the players are in understanding who folks are and why they matter and what's going on with them. Somebody says it's like the medieval Catholic Church in terms of organization, and that's really right. I mean, there are a whole bunch of really important people who expect to be treated like really important people, which means you got to know why they're really important people. But you also have to be able to make the things happen. And so it's a combination of knowing the administration and knowing sort of the people, the personalities, what are the issues, so that, for example, when suddenly a specific kingdom has an issue with some person who's been around for a really long time, it's really helpful to understand who all of those people are and what's going on, so you can understand how you can manage it with minimal hurt feelings. So Sorley asked the question of, given the link to the US for someone outside of the United States to be Laurel. I think that the bigger problem with someone outside the States being Laurel is making sure you know who all the players are. That is to say, to understand who does what and why and how and what the relationships are between them and with you. I think you could do it. I think my communication with the board is all electronic. Most of the members of the board right now, I've never met in my life. There's one exception because she lives half a year in my kingdom, and I've known her for a really long time. That's Jada, Gigi. But most of the rest of them I've only known electronically. So, I mean, you can do that from anywhere around. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, we wanted to come to Locock, and let me just say this out loud to you all. We are gonna do this again when we can all actually travel. It's not gonna be next year because I don't know if we're gonna be able to travel next year, so we don't wanna sort of take a chance on it. But we wanna get there because it really matters. We have had a pelican who is in Drachenwald more than once now, and it worked fine. One of them was someone who had originally lived in the States. That's Ariane Wemerch Katmael. But the other one, Pitari of, had not ever lived in the United States, and, you know, just got to know us all via electronic means at a time when, honestly, we were doing much more on via post mail in an era before Oscar. So Frida then asks, what's being done to address the inherently North American-centric nature of the policy and decisions in the college? So we're working on that. So let me make a couple of quick observations. The first one is that we are only as good as our commentary is. We are only as good as the people who call us on our shit. And one of the things that means we need people from outside North America, both from outside the US and from Canada as well, to help us to shape policy and decisions in ways that are responsive to that broader set of concerns. And then the second thing is, like I said, we need people to call us on it when we are in fact ending up in situations where we are making bad decisions. So I'm going to get out of the Laurel thing for just a second and observe that I was involved. Well, all right, so because I'm not stupid enough to do just one big project at a time, I also helped run the census. And we really struggled with the census on how to be inclusive, but also use terms that everyone would make sense. And we decided there was no way that we could make the race and ethnicity categories international. Just the terminology and the ways that people talk about identities are inherently different in different countries. And unfortunately, you know, one of the things that we ended up doing was we ended up making some people feel a little excluded from that. And so, you know, it does in fact make a difference. And so we're working on it, but, you know, we just need people to keep calling us on it and telling us what's going on and when we mess it up. Yes. So Thomas, you're quite right. Race is a cultural construct. That's absolutely true. And the kinds of racial categories that make sense to people are radically different in different parts of the world. So yeah, completely true. So what projects during my tenure are going to be completed in the near future, and what efforts have yet to be started do I see coming down the pipeline? So there are a group of projects that we've been working on, some of which you know about. I hope that people have seen for example, some of the things that are going on, for example, with trying to make precedents more accessible to people. So everyone knows what precedents are, right? That they are the collection of the collected decisions of the sovereigns over time. And one of the real disasters, and I don't use that term lightly, one of the real disasters of our time in the last 15 years now, but who's counting, is that the business of collecting those precedents in a way that they were easy to use kind of collapsed. One of the intentions of creating SENA, of course, was to make it so that that wasn't as critical as it had been, but not critical doesn't mean we don't still need it. And so we are indeed working on the project. And Beatrice, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're here, aren't you? That is not sure what.
I am, yes.
When are you? Have you already done your thing? Or is that tomorrow?
It is tomorrow. There is a class. There's a class on the update. It is 10 o'clock on the schedule. So from 10 to 11 tomorrow morning, there is an update on the precedent tagging and search project in Heraldry Stream 4.
Mm-hmm. So hope to see some of you there. And, you know, Ishvan points out that the second problem is that the precedents were weirdly distributed, and going back to a really ancient time under the RFS, there was one really critical decision that was nearly impossible to find. It was endowed to, and basically you learned where it was and you found it. And then once you knew where it was, you could go find it again. But it was so badly, I remember having to sort of memorize where it was. So that's one thing. Obviously, we have the big project that has come our way that we were not looking for, which is thinking a great deal about the problem of the use of hate kinds of symbols, the use of things that we understand to be in our language offensive. And so we're spending a lot of time and energy thinking about that because it's 2020 and we can't have nice things. But we're working on, excuse me, we are also, of course, working on the endless project that is Oscar 2.0. I hope that we will have some real progress to announce at some point soon, but we're not quite there yet. But we're working on it. Let's see, I'm sure I'm leaving some big things out. Somebody else want to tell me what other projects we're working on?
Can I talk about one?
Sure.
I've not given you the full update on this, so this might be a little bit surprising, but one of the things that we do a lot, we get a lot of requests for, is archives of, I want to see an image from prior to Oscar, so-and-so's armory. And we have a lovely archivist who is fantastic and very responsive at pulling those out of the archives and sending in redacted images. We want to make her job a little bit easier. We're still going to need her, but we are going to be in the near future putting up a public archive of all those old things redacted as best we can. There's going to be a lot of holes because some of the older forms don't redact well, and she's going to have to do them by hand. But that will be going forward. So knock on wood, in the next 6 months, hopefully we'll have something where people can just go to a website and look up images by name that are registered that are not an Oscar, the prior to 2011 stuff, or the end of 2011.
Thank you. Very nice. I knew that you were doing that, but I didn't think to say it. Anybody got anything else that I didn't talk about? So the question was asked, what are the most, so Evan said, so really quickly before this, Evan said electronic images of pencil drawings on restaurant napkins. No better. Electronic images of a merman, the words, not an image.
Yeah, just the words.
There are those words on a form. The problem is that we don't actually know what postures the mermen are in. It really makes conflict.
Some of that early stuff is amazing, so yeah.
Same.
Okay. The other one that I really, really, really adore, and then we'll go on, is it's a flower of some sort, and it's like a black velvet painting. It's black, but it had crayon underneath, and they rubbed the black off, so it's crayon underneath, and it's something of many colors, and it really is.
Oh dear God, yes.
So there really are some fascinating things in there. I should also observe really quickly that there are also some really kind of marvelously weird things, like Baldwin's badge from Harold's Lament. They registered it to him. There's a picture. It required a little bit of inventiveness because, you know, the blazon is not quite complete and a little nonsensical, but they did. So there's some good stuff in there too. So I got asked the question of what are the most useful skills someone interested in advancing in heraldry should cultivate? And so my answer is, it depends on what way you want to advance in heraldry. Let me start by saying that I'm one of those old-fashioned people, so I kind of believe that you ought to be able to do everything. That is, I believe that someone who's really serious about advancing in heraldry ought to be able to do a little bit of voice heraldry, and certainly sort of the organization of voice heraldry. Whether or not you're incredibly audible isn't as important as sort of knowing how to do the thing so that you can help someone who is more audible to actually get all the things right. And that's about a whole bunch of random things. It's about knowing how, for example, a field is managed in a kingdom, right? Because every kingdom does it a little differently. If you are suddenly thrust behind the thrones to be the herald for a crown or for a coronet, do you have a sense of what you would do, how a court's organized? You should know at least enough about submissions to, you know, not embarrass yourself with really simple stuff. And that you should understand sort of all the other things that make it work. You should understand how precedence works. Here, not the TS version, but the CE version, so that you should be able to, just as an example, in many kingdoms of my acquaintance, I don't know if in all, but in many kingdoms of my acquaintance, the senior folks in a room are expected, for example, to do the toasts at a feast. And so what should you know? You should know what toasts need to be done, in what order, and you should be able to look around the room and at least start the process of who are the people who are there who would be doing the thing. By the way, most of them can take care of it themselves too, right? But at least touching base with them to make sure that everything's happening okay is the kind of thing you should be able to do. So beyond that, then it's a question of building one of those skill sets so that people actually look to you and say, that one, talk to that one when you get there. So I figure it might be more entertaining, instead of answering that question, for me to tell you a story, because stories are way more fun. So I stumbled into heraldry from the research side, and specifically, of course, from onomastics, for those of you who know anything about me. That is the study of names. And I insisted for some time after I joined the SCA that I was not a herald and that I really shouldn't be doing heraldry. Oops. And then the Academy of St. Gabriel's got started, and my Laurel sent me a set of questions and said, here, you should try to answer these. And I did. And then I tried to answer some more, and then I tried to answer some more, and then the next thing I knew, I had written a whole bunch of name articles. At the same time, though, Elspeth Enroth, who was Laurel from 99 to 2001, started doing started doing commentary, a commenting group trying to build up folks for Laurel. And of course, then I realized that I was really, really terrible at Armory. It took me a long time to get to the point that I could blazon well enough to actually conflict check, right? Because it took that work. And, you know, then you just kind of try, I just kind of ended up trying things and trying things and trying things, doing education and submissions and all kinds of other things, and just kind of kept trying things and doing things and moving on. So, you know, I think you just kind of get there. And, you know, sometimes you have people who come in and do amazing things from the start. I'm looking at you, Alice. But most of us, once upon a time, we were really babies in heraldry and not very good at it. So you just kind of grow and you pick a thing. I've watched people do it on the court side. I've watched people do it with precedents. I've watched people do it with being, as a good friend of mine called it, being a protocol droid, knowing all the answers to how you settle all the things. And it goes. So the question was asked about whether or not how we are going around with new kingdoms. So I assume that everyone understands kind of how we get kingdoms going, that we see groups developing as principalities first, and then sort of building up sort of strength in numbers and identity and all this other kind of stuff. And at this moment, I mean, I think we're at this moment, we're at a point where there aren't a lot of groups that are right this second interested in becoming new kingdoms. But I think that the current situation is going to change some things in really important kinds of ways. Because my kingdom, for example, do you all know I live in Ontario? My kingdom, for example, is crippled right now because we can't cross the border. We have a chunk of our kingdom in Canada and a chunk of our kingdom in the United States, and that makes it incredibly difficult. And, you know, yep, and the East is in the same situation, as is North Shield, right? And so it may be that we start seeing some pressure on some places to think about becoming a kingdom in different kinds of ways, because it's not clear how we're going to manage these things. How are things going with that? So I'm going to turn around. How are things going with Lowcock? What's the expectation with New Zealand and Australia?
Okay. We have a closed border between Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, we've had one state open its borders to all travellers in the last few days, but they've had to close their borders to another state where we have had an escalation of plague outbreaks that have gone up to 273 it was yesterday, and that was from a sum of about 60 a week ago. So that state is now being isolated from the rest of the country. That's on the mundane level. Because we're so big, we're fairly big users of Discord and the internet anyway, and Facebook to keep in touch.
Right.
So it hasn't really put the kibosh on anything. It's just cutting face to face. If Amanda is on here, she is crux, and she can probably explain it better than I can.
No, that I think was really what I was interested in. I mean, honestly, in none of the states, none of the entities that make up Ontario are at a point where mundanely we would be allowed to have a group of people that was more than, in my state, it's 10. Anyways, so I mean, we're currently not allowed to have practices or meetings or anything except for in a virtual kind of sense.
Yeah. In my country, there are some restrictions being lifted, but then this thing in the state of Victoria has blown up, and that's all under review again. Some states will have activities progressively, and because different state, different legislature, different laws, Everything is on a state-by-state basis. I know New Zealand is opening up and they are having their first event. It's either this weekend or in a few weekends' time, and that's their first one in months. Mainland Australia is not at that stage yet. The sneaking suspicion is our November Crown will be one of the first face-to-face events.
Mhm.
Sorry,
Hi, I'm from New Zealand.
my
Oh, please
apologies.
speak up.
And we had in Oldhaven in Auckland, we had our first face-to-face event last month. There's no restrictions within New Zealand about travel or meetings or anything. Everything can happen at the moment, but we can't travel to Australia.
My apologies, Elaine. If I'd known, I would have deferred to you immediately. My deepest apologies.
No problem.
My
I
understanding.
just comment that all of the event stewards for this event are currently locked down and we're not even allowed to meet with each other in person at the moment because we all locate in Victoria.
So yeah, there are so many people in this group. It would have been hard to see everybody to recognize anyone. So yeah, as Alice said, I think we're all concerned deeply about, you know, whether or not there are going to actually be any events for the rest of the year, given what's going on. So,
I
you know,
just want to
there's a
say
lot of-
we're in a Canadian kingdom that is, unlike Antier, we're just solely Canadian, but we play so much with groups in Artemisia and with North Shield. And since North Shield is currently divided, it makes things very difficult. Same with Antier. There are things going on in Thierry, and they would love to play with things. Our restrictions are getting limited. However, our border is completely closed, international border with the United States, and it is it changes the whole dynamic for various reasons. We're going to be opening up more step by step by step, but right now what's going on the south side of the border is they're actually locking down more. So it's changing a lot of dynamics. So thank you.
Yeah, the plague is getting worse where I am, for sure.
Perversely, with the forced internet and electronic communications, it's actually knitted the SCA together a lot more closely. I've been attending a lot of Bardic circles as an aside, and there's been a lot of international outreach in all directions, and that's knitted the Bardic community together very strongly. And I think we can do that with the Heraldic community as well, using Zoom and Discord. And I know there was discussion, precedents not being well known about and the like. That could be an idea for a Zoom session along the lines of, okay, once a week of heraldic stuff, maybe at an appropriate time, record it and put it online somewhere so people who are not in the right time zone can review it later. It's just an open thought at this stage. We can use this to, well, celebrate the differences, because every kingdom does stuff a little differently, but also get onto the same page, particularly with diversity stuff that is happening at the moment. That would be a very good one to be on the same page with, and hammer out something that's very workable and flexible depending on which jurisdiction that your group plays in, as well as making the SCA fun and fun for everyone involved.
If I could just
I just-
interrupt slightly, you've got 15 minutes.
I just attended the diversity class that was actually just before this. Absolutely wonderful. A wonderful lady from the Meridays taught it. And I have a hope that a lot of people can download her information afterwards, because as my honorable friend on the other side of the world has said, diversity is an amazing thing. Also with long distance communications, as an area that when we have 3-4 hours between different heralds, it takes a lot of work. And we've been using electronic communication for about 5 years, since when we became a kingdom. And I absolutely love to see the growth in the community. I think many other groups have to realize that this internet, this wonderful interwebs and communication, when you can bring everyone in, I think is absolute key. And you can actually grow your heraldic community and teach and do so many things. And I want to thank everybody who's been working towards that. Thank you.
So just a reminder, Sarah's actually here. This is the lovely lady who taught that. And just a reminder, I'm going to be talking tomorrow at sometime noon, I don't remember, about names and naming practice as we move into beyond Europe and beyond the gender binary, and sort of starting to think about the kinds of things that we need to keep moving that project forward. I think you all know we've been doing some things on working around with that. Someone asked how much Laurel has to do with the creation or alteration of ceremonies. The answer is not very much. That's an inter-kingdom kind of question. I do in fact have somebody working on starting to put together some more resources so that it's easier to share, but every kingdom does things in their own different way, and we would not want to ask everyone to do it the same way, because the different ways in which people do things the different kingdoms do things in ways that are so radically different that solutions that work really well for one kingdom absolutely would not work in another. And, you know, we don't want to stop that great movement. But I'm hoping that the Laurel office will in fact become a bigger repository of and a place to share that kind of information so that it's easier to find. So I hope there'll be some stuff, but not so much the directly involved in creating it. So other questions, other thoughts? Feel free to speak up as well as to put things in chat.
Juliana?
Dime.
I just wanted to point out, I think the one thing that the SCA and the College of Arms should take away from this is with the huge shift towards acceptance of online training and interactions. I mean, I'll just say it, there was pushback when I started doing online classes before all this happened. People were saying, this is the SCA, we don't do that. Now that that's out of the way, I would encourage every herald to take that ball and run with it, because there's opportunity for officer training, for skills training. And that's all the more time to go have fun at an event when we finally get together.
Yep. So among other people, Yehuda. Hey, Yehuda, you want to talk about your wonderful resources you put together? You're muted.
The problem is I control my volume with my sound mixer here, but then somebody keeps muting me in Zoom, which is where I get lost. So I've got a series of heraldic training videos. These are from quite a few years ago now. They're available on the East Kingdom Education Herald website, which is elmit.eastkingdom.org. I'll put it in chat. It's oh, there we go. Thank you. They're honestly, they're a little dated now, and I've been thinking about what needs to happen with that, but I've been working on another project recently, so it's definitely something I want to redo. I'd be very cautious of doing it on Twitch. I saw the in comments because there's no way to make Twitch at all private, which means absolutely any person watching Twitch can come in and come into chat. And I actually, you know, I stream on Twitch in a unrelated to the SCA, and some of the communities there can get very toxic if you're not careful. So I would personally not want to do that. In fact, my YouTube videos, the Elmit videos are just on YouTube, but they're unlisted because, again, I don't really want the great masses of YouTube commenters commenting on these videos. So that's my inclination. I do want to redo the videos at some point. I've learned a lot since I made those, both about video production and about heraldry. And I think one of the things I want to change is that in those I went for like 1 hour long format. And I think the thing to do is to make shorter single topic videos. So instead of one 60-minute video, make 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20-minute video. So, but they're still there, and you know, probably 80 to 90% of the info in them is still correct. It's, you know, just don't like pay too much attention to unity of posture.
So for those who were paying attention, that was Xander. He was being loud and wanted to pay attention. So he wanted attention. So I figured I would show him off. He is in fact indeed a floof. Yes. He's one of our 2 cats. So I think we've all learned that shorter is better around videos. I've learned so much about doing videos while I've been teaching online. Because, you know, the previous stuff I've done has basically been recorded lectures in the sense of I get up in front of people for 50 minutes and teach with someone with a camera in the background. And now we're thinking about dedicated kinds of ways. And I think that it would also be true. So someone suggested a bit ago that it might be interesting to think about doing a virtual known world, at least from time to time, because we have in fact ended up in a situation where more people are at this known world than have ever been at one before. By a long shot. They shut it off at 500.
So the real irony for me, the real irony for me is personally, I hate learning from videos, and when I do, I vastly prefer long, in-depth ones to little short ones. But that's
but that's because you have a law degree.
Fair.
You're at one end of the bell curve. I am too, but you know, it turns out that the correct answer is 5 to 10 minute videos on single topics. So one of the things that we had to talk about is whether there are ways we can do sort of virtual kinds of things. And I think we've learned a lot about that during this time. One of my apprentices has now taught in 3 kingdoms since this started. Gwen, go ahead.
I wasn't actually, so I actually raised my hand by accident. I was going to say in the chat, but I was just going to say, as someone in Lockhart, I've never had the opportunity to attend a known world symposium before, and I probably won't really travel to them in future. This, for us on this end of the world, the online classes, I feel more like the known world is part of my SCA experience now.
Good. And I feel like you guys are now better part of my experience. Though at some point I still want to get there. Still want to get there. Any other last thoughts? Or last questions? So let me just lay out if someone else thinks of something, I want to say a little bit later this summer, I'm hoping we're going to do a pretty intensive online consult table kind of deal. So normally at Penzic, which of course would be coming up in about 3 weeks, we do one of the biggest consult tables at the known world. For those of you who don't know, I've been involved in running the consult table at Penzic for a really long time. So it's near and dear to my heart. And I'm thinking that especially for the kingdoms where there hasn't been a lot of heraldic consultation going on because people are used to doing it at events, that we can do a big push and try to get some of those folks involved and engaged in different kinds of ways. And I think that that's the big thing that I hope everyone takes away from all of this, is that this has turned into an interesting opportunity for us to do some of the same things in really different kinds of ways. And I feel like it's been really productive. I mean, on the one hand, I'm sort of looking forward, I'm really looking forward to the moment where I can see a bunch of you face to face and I can hug you. Because, you know, one of the things that I'm missing terribly at Known World is that moment where we actually get to see each other. We get to look each other in the eye, and more importantly, we get to actually touch each other. But there's so much from this, right? So many people who would normally not be here, and so many great kinds of things going on. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of sort of pluses and minuses to what we're doing. And one of the things is to keep innovating, to keep thinking about things in different kinds of ways, to look back a really long time. I remember when commentary happened once a month, where once a month I published a letter, an actual physical piece of paper that I printed out about 1 million copies of, and I sent physically to about 70 other people. And when we went over to Oscar, we completely changed that because people had a chance to do real-time kind of interaction. We had a chance for a lot more sort of give and take and a lot more back and forth, and it was really productive, and we got a lot of new commenters out of it. And so one of the things that we got to think about now is, how does this current moment create new opportunities for us to do different things in different ways that are sometimes better? And one of the things that sure has turned out to be better are these kinds of virtual symposia where suddenly we can all kind of stare at each other and do these really cool things together. But yeah, I miss the hours-long hotel lobby conversations too, and going out for drinks together and doing all that fun stuff that we get to do. But let's keep innovating and let's keep trying new things, because it's the only way we get someplace new and different to better things than we get to. And yeah, for all of you, a big old virtual hug. For those of you who know me in real life, you know I'm a terribly huggy person. So, you know, I'd pretty much hug all of you given a chance. So I want you to know two more things. The first thing is this: my phone number and my email are on every single cover letter that we ever produce. Second, use it. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. Either in my official sense, if you want my unofficial, like personal email, then it's on every single article I've ever written. And there's like, 30 of them around the internet. So go find one of them. I like having conversations with new people. I like getting to know people. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm also on Facebook. I don't post nearly as much as many other people, but I'm there. I'm in all kinds of places. Please don't hesitate to reach out, because making all of us human is one of the things that we do pretty well together. So anyone else, Emma, or anyone else want to offer some last thoughts?
I wanted to make one comment, or actually it's a paired comment. Historical note: when I was Laurel Sovereign of Arms, towards the end of my tenure, I was formally rebuked by the board in writing.
Remind everyone when that was. Oh, Allison.
The second thing that I wanted to say, as someone who was a computer professional, a lot of what we are doing today, this evening, for me, would not have been feasible even 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The technology has jumped so forward. There are people who are attending on their phones. We have the Jetsons. And so we can go forward so much faster because the tools are there that were not there even 5 or 10 years ago. You live in an age of wonders, my dear.
I want my flying car. Where's my flying car?
Have you seen how people drive on the surface in 2 dimensions?
Yeah.
Forget flying cars.
They'd be grounded because of the plague anyway.
Not until
fair
we
enough,
master
fair enough.
gravity. Not
Juliana,
until we fix the falling part.
you've been in my car, Juliana. You know it's in my driveway.
It's true.
Yeah, exactly.
You run the risk if your flying car breaks down, you're stuck up there all night.
That's why you bring a rope ladder with you.
Hey, social distancing.
With all the idiot drivers on the roads, can you imagine what's like up in the sky?
Autopilot.
So
there's a problem with auto driving in this country. The automatic driving systems of vehicles have trouble with animals that hop. They haven't worked that out yet.
But I don't think they hop high enough for flying
Right.
cars to be affected.
Where I am and where many other people in the US are, is they also leap really high if you let them. All right, so let me remind you all that indeed, I hope I'll see most of you tomorrow at the road show, when we'll be talking about how we make decisions and even doing some of them. Take care, have a great evening or a great lunchtime. Hey, for me it's evening, for some people it's night. Have a great lunchtime.